So we must do two things, two great things together, to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself.
The Christian that we are becoming is that dynamic consciousness which is continually processed through the positive and feedback circuits and laws, the laws of absolute Christian Science and Christian Science. And this is what reforms us. It is reforming us, and now principle as the main tone will show us that actually that Christian, that form of reformation, is a self-organized system, meaning that we are being organized like our principle. Doesn't that follow that in adhering to our principle, in undergoing the workings, the calculus of divine science, absolute Christian Science, that we are becoming like our principle? This is a self-organized state, dynamic state of being. With the fourth subject, to my sense, it is the self-organizing principle. Just as in mind we had the information principle, in spirit the ordering principle, in soul the identity principle. Now it is the self-organizing principle. You see the self-organizing principle operating on the level of Christian Science as a principle of self-organization, such that we become a self-organizing system, a self-organized system, a system that is just like its principle. And this, to be just like, is what the text refers to as honest, the honesty of principle. The prayer of honesty is to be lined up with our principle, in accord with that principle as we now know it, the principle of mind, spirit, and soul. It's the creative aspect of the principle, but it is that creative aspect, everything that we have seen about the dynamic energy of being fluctuated with the divine nature, of the autocatalytic ability of that nature, of the self-regulatory aspect of that nature, that these are the creative elements then that render us a self-organized system, shaped and patterned and scaled by the self-organizing principle in its creative aspect. It will then be life, truth, and love that shows us what such a system demonstrates. It will show us the demonstrative wing of the principle. Do you know that fundamentally, that you have one principle and that its creative aspect is mind, spirit, and soul, and its demonstrative aspect is life, truth, and love? And so a self-organized idea is an idea that has been organized by mind, spirit, and soul. Its creative principle. It reflects then that creative principle. And in so doing, in so being, it demonstrates life, truth, and love. So the honesty that we find in the fourth subject is countered by the hypocrisy. We get, really the text is, when you first look at it and take it, it looks very voluminous and intertwined. But when you order it and sort it out, you begin to see these two standpoints coming into view. That's as though principle would say, this is what you are as a self-organizing system, and this is what a self-organizing system is. This is what a self-organizing system is not. And so principle will fall back on mind, spirit, and soul to tell us through its 7 subtones and in 7 different ways what the self-organizing system is, and it will fall back on the counterfeit of mind, spirit, and soul to show us what is not a self-organized system. That's the honesty and the hypocrisy. So the fourth prayer of principle will say to us, this is what you are as my self-organizing system, and this is what you are not. So it is addressed to a consciousness that has been adhering to the course of mind, spirit, and soul. It is the prayer of honesty through conformity with principle, and shows us that the prayers of mind, spirit, and soul are one principled prayer. As we have one principled prayer, then we see that this prayer is sounding through everything in our lives. It is affecting that which is within and that which is without. And so let's look now at the epitome for the fourth prayer, and we will see all of these elements indicated. It is the prayer of obedience to God, and now we know what that obedience is, that term that may seem nebulous to us if we just read it without knowing the structure of the textbook, the structure of the first chapter, that if we see her talking about obedience, or someone says you should be obedient to God, what does that mean? It really means mind, spirit, soul is principle. Mind, spirit, soul, principle, this is obedience. Obedience to God. This is the prayer of honesty, by which we bring everything within us into accord with Him. So you hear another aspect of principle, the isomorphy with principle, with the divine principle, that we find that we have the same form or structure as the system, the same form, the same structure as the system of the principle, and this unites us with the impersonal workings of the divine principle. What do you hear when you hear impersonal workings? You hear the whole working of the model of being, the whole working of the levels of divine science, absolute Christian Science. These are the workings of the divine principle, and we begin to understand that they are absolutely impersonal. And so we become the impersonal working of the divine principle ourselves. We are a divine calculus, a cybernetic idea in operation. So taking the very first subtone then, this would be principle as mind. And the epitome is that we have to go back to the main tone and see that the subtones are really answering a fundamental question, namely, how is a principle-like attitude established? Or we could say, how is a self-organizing system established? So as mind, it is established by praying according to, in accord with, an honest desire. So this first subtone is going to show us our coincidence with mind, with the first prayer. You can see each one of the prayers really accentuated now in each of the 7 subtones. She makes a general statement regarding the whole tone of principle in that very first sentence. The danger from prayer, that is to say, the danger from indicating that a dishonest approach, a prayer that is a dishonest approach, the danger from prayer is that it may lead us into temptation. You see, into the opposite of soul. And if we have been led into the opposite of soul, everything that we have seen in the previous subtone, what happens then? By it, we may become involuntary hypocrites. So, if you have the counterfeit of soul, you have the counterfeit of principle. What is the counterfeit of soul? It's the counterfeit of spirit and the counterfeit of mind. So the counterfeit of mind and spirit and soul is the counterfeit of principle. And this is a hypocrite. That's what a hypocrite is. And it may be involuntary at this point. We may say, oh, I don't want to be hypocritical. It's not my desire to be hypocritical. But if the prayer of the fourth subject is not coincident with the prayer of desire in mind, then we become involuntary hypocrites. And what is the constitution of that hypocritical state? It is uttering desires which are not real, and consoling ourselves in the midst of sin. You hear the opposite of mind, spirit, and soul? Uttering desires, the opposite of mind, because they are the opposite of spirit. They're not really real. And the opposite of soul, that we console ourselves in the midst of sin by recalling, remembering, recollecting that we have prayed over it. We prayed over that at one time. Once I prayed about that. See, I prayed once about it. Either recalling that we prayed about it once, or that we mean to pray about it. We intend to pray about it at some later day. Mean to ask forgiveness at some later day. So she says, this hypocrisy, which is nothing but the counterfeit of mind, the counterfeit of spirit, the counterfeit of soul, that is deviating from the course all along the way, that mind, spirit, and soul, is a hypocrisy that is fatal to religion. There's this wonderful sense of religion again that she's using, meaning to find or to gain, to attain your scientific boundedness to your principle, to be bound back to your principle. Hypocrisy is fatal to that, as the counterfeit of principle. So, principle as mind is showing us the conformity between spoken prayer and real desire. It says, what is a self-organizing system? It's a system that is honest, and that honesty is a desire, mind, that is real, spirit, and sinless, soul, therefore principled, principle. And a dishonest prayer is a desire that is without its substantiation in mind, spirit, soul, a desire that is unreal, that is consoling itself in the midst of sin, and is consequently hypocritical. You see that we're already right at the point of principle as mind, that we're being shown what it means to be self-organized like your principle. That means you are mind-like, spirit-like, soul-like, and you are principled.